All right, y'all, man. Welcome back. Welcome back. All right. So we got our first story. You guys have probably heard this one, but man, it is still a significant major hit in Super Rugby. Super Rugby is a professional league that is going down in the South Pacific, involving Australia, New Zealand, Tonga, and Fiji, of course. And it was the news that the Melbourne Rebels will not be continuing on through next year. A huge, huge hit to the program, a huge hit to Super Rugby, but one that is a really interesting story and setup of how poorly managed these teams are and exactly how much the financial restitution is just not there. Now, obviously, this was announced just a few days ago. Australia Rugby said that Melbourne Rebels would no longer be able to participate. They're no longer wanting to fund this team. It's kind of, they're over it, and it seems to be based off of the fact that there were a lot of broken promises that were going on for me. So, kind of let's put some background into it if you don't know. So, first and foremost, it was about 5 months ago, where the rebels actually were already in desperate financial strait. They were actually about $23 million in debt before they entered into voluntary administration at the beginning of January. But since then, whenever they were coming back from a loss against Fiji on the final rounds this year, Rugby Australia said, yo, we're not doing this anymore. And it looks like it has been something that has been building up for years. Australia Rugby seems to have been inputting money into this team for a long time, even though this team, the Rebels, started back in 2011, but they've never been financially stable. They have been consistently an issue. They've been consistently incapable of being able to get um, their lives together, basically, right? Like they haven't been able to get their lives together. And so I think after this 23 million in debt and they went into it, the idea was that the rebels were going to come up with a plan, the what they call the consortium was supposed to come up with a plan to actually find a way to be able to get some new injection of money and to be able to find stability, as opposed to taking all these grants that have been applied to them from Rugby Australia and from these elements. And there was a lot of talk apparently that goes along with this Rebels team, saying they have some people, man, they're getting stuff ready. They have about 18 million in funding that they were about to get together, and looks like it was all through Gazy. So Rugby Australia said, "Yo, you guys are not doing it anymore. You guys are clearly don't have anybody on the side. You keep talking like you're trying to delay us. Like we know what's going on over here. So yeah, you guys can't do this. Y'all can't hold up. Yo, it's over." But this is something that has a little bit of a lasting effect. Apparently, Melbourne Rugby is in the Rugby Victoria area, where a lot of financial interest goes. Obviously, like I said, this pro team has been around since 2011, so it's a pretty long-standing team in all intents and purposes. Um, but you also still have the stakeholders that are in that area. That it's an area where they are still considering to be able to put the Rugby World Cup over in that spot. It is a place where the women's Melbourne Rebels are still in existence. The youth side is still something that needs to be worked on, and it's a place where a lot of money has been invested, especially as according to Rugby Australia's chief executive officer, Phil Waugh, and chairman Daniel Hebert. They basically said, like, yo, we've been put like 13.8 million over there over the last 6 years. You guys have done nothing with it. And essentially, they are finding themselves still in desperate straits, but they still have an intention to be able to continue to work with that region. Okay, so giving you the background, giving you the information, what is my thoughts on all of this? Look, this is once again comes back to what the state of rugby has been. All right, we obviously saw this just over the course of the last 2 years between the loss of the London Irish, the Worcester Warriors, the LA franchise, and the Giltinis, the Gilgronis, Rugby Atlanta. We have the loss of Wasps. And just again, this consistent trend of teams, the Toronto Arrows, a consistent loss where the revenue does not match what is being put in, and a lot is being supported. Now, obviously, in the U.S., it's not overreaching in terms of USA Rugby funding, well, except for with the anthem, and that's technically World Rugby, but funding the entire professional element. Whereas in Australia, it seems to be very heavy, and especially in a place that is constantly losing to rugby league in that same spot. But it seems like this Australian government, this Rugby Australia has just, it's had enough, and they are barely holding on for dear life. They still have the issue of trying to be able to figure out how to establish their great grassroots. Again, they're losing a ton of players. Basically, that country is a rugby league country versus a rugby union country. It makes sense. And again, it goes back to what is it that rugby wants to be able to have? What is it that rugby is trying to do? Because that's what's affecting how it's making its money. Obviously, you have small populations, but very endearing ones within the South Pacific. But whatever it is that is your contracts, you're not entertaining and you're not developing. This is something that happened. Obviously, we see that within England, a lot of misdevelopment. Wales is dealing with their own financial security because they've overstretched where their budgets and everything like that. So it's not something that is unusual, but it's getting way too common. And that constriction is not being solved by good ideas. It just seems to be more borrow money, borrow money, borrow money, borrow money for another time, and then eventually hope that something comes through, and it's just not. It's not. You're not winning the game. You're not playing this responsibly. And again, this isn't an area where rugby league is literally having its heyday. It is reaching some of its peak levels that it's never reached before in the past. And they are just not keeping up. Rugby union in Australia is not keeping up. And we're seeing more of this. There's still even complaints. And this is not even going to probably stop anytime soon, because you still have issues that are happening in Super Rugby in terms of funding in New Zealand, and subsequently just within the rugby league, which we will talk about shortly. But let me know what you guys think about this. Knowing what you've been hearing about Australia and seeing what's been going on, like, what do you feel is going to be the issue that prevents another rugby club, another pro rugby club, from shutting down? Basically, you just have top 14 that is almost holding it down. Premier Rugby is hanging on by a thread. And obviously, the addition of South African teams in the URC adds a bit of challenge. But again, is it bringing in the revenue? South Africa right now isn't getting paid by TV deals. So, there's still the chance of what are we bringing to the table when it comes to the actual value prop and how that involves with the community. But I want to know what your guys' thoughts are, man. Where do you guys feel with it? But that's my thoughts, where it goes from there. All right, y'all. Let's move on to the next story over here as we talk about the other side of this situation.
Buckwheat is changing lives. My name is GiftTime. I'm here with Health Enhanced Foods, and I want to tell you about one of my favorite products on our shelves, buckwheat baking mix. Buckwheat is a seed that is incredibly nutrient and protein dense. But what makes it even more important, that buckwheat baking mix is absolutely gluten-free. A lot of times whenever people have buckwheat mixes, they actually even hold wheat inside of it. So it's not fully gluten. And if you're a person that is celiac or diabetic, or you're just really trying to be health conscious, it's not something that you want to have to worry about. What makes our buckwheat baking mix even more important is that it is versatile. You can use it for pancakes, you can use it for waffles, you can use it for making loaves of bread, you can make it for cupcakes. But what helps even more is that it is allergen free, it is nut free, it is dairy free, that there is no additional additives in it. There's no leavening there, so that if you want to be able to raise your bread, you can put in the baking powder yourself and get it fluffy. If you don't, you absolutely do not have to. You get the bread that you love without the cost to your health. You can absolutely find buckwheat baking mix at healthenhancedfoods.com. Absolutely check it out. Get your nostalgia back. Get back to eating and loving the way that you are, and absolutely get back to the energy that you know that you can get without having to destroy yourself. I'm looking forward to seeing you get it. Let's go.